Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu, and I'm back with another episode of Spoiler Sundays. So this is the time of the week where I take a look at all of the new spoilers that we got for the Digimon card game over in Japan, and, well, talk about them. So we got about 32 cards spoiled this week, which is quite a lot to have, so let's just dive right in and get into the excitement. So first up, we have Snow Goblimon. So Snow Goblimon is just a blah vanilla rookie, not anything too special to write home about. Next up, we have Hyogamon, which is just another blah vanilla level 4, again, nothing too special to write home about. Next up, we have a new version of Penguinmon. So Penguinmon is still going to be a blue level 3 Digimon with the on-play ability where we get to place one blue level 3 Digimon card or one Digimon card with Aqua or Sea Animal from its traits from our hand to the bottom of this Digimon's Digivolution source to draw one card. So it's kind of playing into that whole messing around with your inheritable sources sub-theme that we saw Xros play around with, so this might be a nice support card for that deck. And speaking of him getting some more support, next we have Waru Seidramon. So Waru Seidramon is going to be a level 5 purple and blue Digimon. The evolution cost is a little bit on the expensive side, Digivolving for 4 on top of a level 4 purple or blue Digimon. But that's just par for the course for how these types of cards generally work, but most of the time you're probably not necessarily going to be digivolving up into it, and you're going to find a way to tuck it underneath the source and be able to split it apart, just because it has a on-play /win digivolving ability for us to take advantage of, where we get to play one purple or blue level 3 Digimon from one of our purple or blue Digimon's Digivolution source without paying its memory cost. So this just helps us split apart our stacks with our Xros and how it wants to play, and then on top of that it has a nice inheritable ability for us to use while it's sitting underneath, where during all turns, once per turn, when a Digimon is played by an effect, then we get to gain a memory, which is, well, what we're trying to do is play Digimon by the effect of splitting it apart from our inheritable sources, making this a pretty decent support card for the deck. And then we have a new option support card for that deck as well, where it's a blue option card in the form of Maelstrom. So for the low cost of 5, we get to play one blue Digimon card from your blue Digimon's Digivolution source without paying its memory cost. Then if we have a Digimon with Seidramon in its name, we get to return one of the opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon back to the bottom of their deck. So this is just basically a more blue-specific Kaiser Nail with the upside of potentially being able to bounce one of the opponent's Digimon, which is pretty good considering its security ability also activates its main, and we could utilize some of the on-play abilities of some of our Seidramon cards to be able to try to control and manipulate the opponent as a nice security threat. Next up, we have a new version of Tyrannomon. So I kind of figured with the new Tyga we would get more Tyrannomon support, and this is actually a pretty decent card for the Tyrannomon deck. So what this Tyrannomon is doing is it's a level 4 red and green Digimon, and it digivolves for 3 on top of a red or green level 3. So a little bit expensive, but with the old Tyga, ideally we're going to try to reduce that cost, and it has an on-play /win digivolving ability for us to take advantage of, where we get to play a Tamer card with a memory cost of 3 from our hand for free. So this is just really good just because it could help actually play our Tamers, which is usually something the Tyrannomon deck kind of lacked, and it tried to shore up its weakness in various other ways, but having the ability to play your Tamers because your Tamers are your setup cards is super important for this type of a deck to even function at all. Then on top of that, it has a very stereotypical inheritable ability where during your turn, while you have a Tamer in play, then this Digimon gains plus 2000 DP, which Tyrannomons generally want to do something very stereotypical to green, which is just attack into the opponent's Digimon, and you want to make sure that yours is going to be as powerful as it possibly can when it's trying to do that, but it also helps not only just attack into the opponent's Digimon, but attack into the opponent's security as well, just because it is a more generic DP boost. Next up, we have Buster Dive. So Buster Dive is a 4-costed green option where if we were to use this card from our hand and we have a green tamer in play, then we get to reduce the memory cost by 1. So potentially this is going to be costing 3 instead of the full 4. Then what this card is doing is it has the main ability where one of your Digimon gets 5,000 DP and Rush for the turn. Then one of your Digimon gets to attack the opponent's Digimon. So this is kind of acting similar to how Chaosmon had his Digivolution ability work, except now we're gaining the Rush ability, so we could use this on one of our Digimon to ideally not pass the turn, then Digivolve it, and then it has the Rush and basically the Pseudo Blitz ability to still be able to make an attack, which is pretty strong, allowing us to actually use our cards more effectively. Then its security ability just adds itself to our hand, so that way we have the ability to be able to use this card when we need to. Next, we have even more Tyrannomon support in the form of Metal Tyrannomon. So this new version of Metal Tyrannomon is going to be a green and black Digimon, Digivolving for 4 on top of a green or black level 4 for 3. Then it has the on-play and when Digivolving ability, where for each of our green or black tamers that we have in play, we get to suspend one of the opponent's Digimon, so a mini shine effect, but it's suspending instead of deleting or DP reducing. Then one of the opponent's suspended Digimon can't unsuspend during the opponent's unsuspend phase. Then it has a nice inheritable ability for us to utilize, where during all turns, once per turn, when this Digimon deletes an opponent's Digimon by battle, we get to trash the top card of the opponent's security stack, so it's acting as a pseudo-piercing, burning the opponent for us doing what Tyrannomons want to do, which is just try to beat up the opponent's Digimon, which is pretty good. And then we got the Big Daddy himself, a new version of Rust Tyrannomon. So Rust Tyrannomon is actually a rare, it's not an SR, so I wonder what they're going to be doing with Tyga support. Unless Gigimon is the Tyga support, I don't know. But it seems pretty interesting on what this card is trying to do, considering it is a level 6 green and black Digimon. It digivolves for 5 on top of a green or black level 5 and has 13,000 DP. So he's a pretty strong card stat-wise. Then on top of that, he has a nice ability where when you would digivolve into this card, for each green and black tamer that we have in play, we get to reduce the Digivolution cost by 1, so it wants us to try to flood the field with some tamers, so that way it makes this card easier to use. Then it has a nice secondary ability where during all turns, once per turn, when this Digimon deletes an opponent's Digimon by battle, then we get to unsuspend this Digimon, so that way we could pair this up with some of our other abilities to try to stunlock and suspend the opponent's Digimon down, and then swing into them right away, just because we could unsuspend with Rust Tyrannomon. So it's kind of doing something similar to the old version. I don't necessarily know if this is better. I think it's better. But going along with even more Tyrannomon support, next we have a new version of Tyga. So Tyga is still going to be a green tamer that costs 3, so it kind of plays along with how the other one wants to play and being able to play these tamers a little bit more efficiently. And then he has 2 abilities. So his first ability is during your turn, all of your Digimon get plus 1,000 DP, so it's kind of acting like the red Ty from the starter deck, where it's just a generic DP boost, which is pretty okay, but what we're trying to do is utilize him more so for his secondary ability, where during your turn, when you would digivolve one of your green Digimon into a level 5 or higher, then you get to suspend this tamer to reduce the memory cost of that Digivolution by 1, so it's kind of acting similar to the other Tyga, except it's a lot more generic, opening up to use it for other cards, not just Tyrannomons, but Tyrannomons still probably want to use this card as well. Next, we have a new version of Chuman. So this new version of Chuman is actually a pretty interesting card in terms of the deck that it wants to try to go into. So it is a yellow and a black level 3 Digimon. It digivolves for 1 on top of a yellow or black level 2, which is a little bit expensive, but most of the time you're probably just going to be hard playing this card, just because you just want him to get him out and get him going rather than hide him in raising, and even then, he only has 1,000 DP still, but that's okay because he has some really good abilities both natively and inheritably. So what he's doing is during your turn, natively, when this Digimon would digivolve into a Digimon with Tsukumon in its name, then we get to reduce the Digivolution cost by 1, so it's just a more tempo efficient card to use when we're trying to use our Tsukumons. Then it has a nice inheritable ability for when it's underneath our Tsukumon, where on delete, if this Digimon contains Tsukumon or Etamon in its name, then we could play one Chuman from our trash suspended without paying its memory cost. So using this card basically buys us back the ability to reuse this card, and it kind of creates this loop where we just want to use our Chumons in combination with our Etamons and Tsukumons, have them die, and then have a whole bunch of Digimon be spawning out based off of the different abilities that we could be playing around with. And speaking of our Tsukumons, we have a new version of Tsukumon, and like Chuman, it's going to be a yellow and black Digimon. This is going to be the level 4, still only having 1000 DP, just because he wants to die, and he evos for 2 on top of a level 3 black or yellow Digimon. So what this card is doing is he has, again, another nice ability native to him, and another inheritable ability. So his native ability states that it's an on-delete effect, where we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck, add 1 card with Chuman, Tsukumon, or Etamon in its name from among them into our hand, and then trash the rest. So it seems like they're trying to lean heavier into more of this type of a focus around Chuman, Tsukumons, and Etamons. Then on top of that, he has a nice inheritable ability where during all turns, when this Digimon would be deleted, by deleting another Digimon with Tsukumon in its name from the field, we get to prevent that deletion. So that's pretty interesting of an ability, considering it's kind of like the decoy ability, but maybe a little bit better for Tsukumon's specific synergies. Which it seems like the Tsukumon specific synergies can help set itself up to actually act as some removal for the opponent's Digimon in the form of King Tsukumon. So King Tsukumon is going to be the deck's level 5, it seems like, where again it's a yellow and black Digimon. It digivolves for 4 on top of a level 4 yellow or black Digimon, and it actually has 6000 DP, but it has the upside and alternative Digivolution condition, where we could digivolve it for 3 on top of a level 4 Digimon with Tsukumon in its name, which is pretty decent considering it has the on-play ability and when digivolving ability, where if the opponent has 16 or more cards into their trash, I don't really understand the reference behind that number, but whatever. Or if we have 3 or more cards with Tsukumon in its name in our trash, which I think is going to be a little bit easier to attain, then one of the opponent's Digimon becomes a Tsukumon, which will be a white Digimon with 3000 DP until the end of the opponent's turn. So that's pretty interesting considering we haven't really had a card transform the opponent's cards before, so this is going to be something unique and special to this Tsukumon-based deck. Then on top of that, it also has a nice when attacking ability, where for each other Digimon with Tsukumon in its name in play, both yours and the opponent's, then this Digimon gains security attack +1, which if you do digivolve after attacking with the Tsukumon, then that buff will transfer over to the higher level. So I'm not entirely sure what they're trying to line up there, but this is going to be a pretty interesting card to be playing around with, considering it's doing something we haven't really seen in the game before, with transforming the opponent's Digimon for the turn. Then, on top of that, its inheritable ability states that during all turns, when this Digimon would be deleted by deleting one other Digimon with Tsukumon in its name, we could prevent that deletion, so it's doing the same inheritable ability as the level 4 Tsukumon we just saw, just on the level 5, and the ideal combo play is to try to utilize this with the fact that we want to transform the opponent's Digimon to use the opponent's Digimon to delete them, instead of our own, so that way we could try to have some alternative forms of removal. And then we got a new option card that's kind of playing along with this type of a deck in the form of Cootie Kick. So Cootie Kick is a 2-costed black option card, and it has the ability where if you would use this card and we have a black tamer in play, then we get to reduce the memory cost of this card by 1. So most of the time, or ideally, this card is going to be costing 1 to use. And it's a pretty strong card to use for 1 memory because it has the nice main ability where one of your Digimon with Numemon, Tsukumon, Nanimon, or Etamon in its name can't be blocked by one of the opponent's Digimon, and it gains the on-delete ability of gaining 3 memory until the end of the opponent's turn. So this is kind of doing something like what Parabolic Junk was doing, except it's adding the unblockable to the Digimon that we want to be utilizing it with. Then its security ability states that we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck, and we get to play a black Digimon with a play cost of 3 or less from among them for free, and trash the remaining cards. So it's just allowing us to try to help have a nice wide field as best as we possibly can, and a lot of these cards are going to be costing 3 or less, so it's going to be a nice card to use to pull out either level 3s or level 4s to be able to get the ball rolling for what the strategy of the deck is trying to do. Next up, we have Tawarman. So Tawarman is a pretty decent Digimon where he is a level 4 black or purple Digimon, Digivolves for 3 on top of a black or purple level 3, and he has the alternative Digivolution condition where he could Digivolve for 1 on top of another Diamemon. So that's already pretty decent on having different ways to be able to play the card, and for utilizing the card, he's going to be adding some extra protection into the Bagra army deck. So what he's doing is he has the decoy ability for Bagra armies in their traits, so he's going to be helping protect our Digimon, and on top of that, he has a secondary ability where he's going to help protect our Tamer, where our main Tamer for the Bagra army deck won't be able to be deleted as long as this card's around. So any Tamer hate he has protection for to make sure that we can actually use our Tamer for its Digicross enabling abilities. And then it has a nice on-delete ability as its third ability, where we get to play one Damemon suspended from our trash without paying its memory cost. So whenever this Digimon is going to get deleted, then it's going to spit out a Digimon, which is going to be pretty decent just to be able to continuously have Digimon on the field. Then it has the nice inheritable ability that's kind of stereotypical to a lot of the Bagra army cards, where during the opponent's turn, when this card is trashed from the Digivolution by an effect, then we get to gain 1 memory, just to doing your stereotypical Bagra army control type stuff. And another new card for this Bagra army deck is going to be Muso Nightmare. So Muso Nightmare is a pretty decent Digimon for us to use, kind of acting like a pseudo level 6 based on how he wants to be used. So he can Digivolve for 2 on top of a black level 5, or Digivolve for 4 on top of a purple level 4. So it's always nice to see that they're playing around with different ways to be able to Digivolve the card based on the color that he's going to be played in, just because he also is a black and purple Digimon. Then he has the ability where this Digimon is also treated as Dark Knightmon and Tawarman, so it's counting as both of those Digimon to be used in those respective decks differently. Then he has the nice on-play and when Digivolving ability, where we get to place one Digimon with Nightmon in its name or Bagra Army in its traits from our hand or trash to the top of this Digimon's Digivolution source. Then if this Digimon has Tawarman in its Digivolution, then 3 of the opponent's Digimon gets de-Digivolved 1, which is pretty good and added some extra control, especially since we know that both black and purple have ways to be able to play this card relatively easily, just because, again, it's counting itself as a Dark Knightmon and a Tawarman. And this card has a nice on-delete ability for us to use, where on delete we get to return up to 2 black or purple Digimon from our trash to our hand, so that way we could try to reuse them. And we kind of do want to try to reuse them, more specifically our Tawarmons and our Dark Knightmons, just because he has the Digicross 2 ability between Dark Knightmon and Tawarman. So the Digicross 2 ability will basically make this a level 5 that hard plays for 6, just because it's going to be reduced by 4 if we actually use the full effect of the Digicross ability. So it's not like it's the worst thing in the world to hard play a level 5 for 6, especially since we know it has a decent on-play ability. So I'm curious to see how those types of decks will adapt, or if this will spawn its own new deck with all of the different support cards that we have already for it. Next, we have a new version of Cutemon. So this new version of Cutemon is still going to be a yellow level 3 Digimon. Stats aren't anything to write home about, but it also can Digivolve for 0 on top of any other level 2 with Cross Hearts in its traits, as we've seen before with some other level 3s that are Cross Hearts. Then what we're really trying to gain out of the card is its on-play ability, where we get to place one Digimon with Cross Hearts in its traits from our trash at the bottom of one of our Tamers, and then if we have a Digimon with Darulumon in its name, or has Darulumon in its Digivolution source, then we get to place up to 2 Digimon with Cross Hearts from our trash to the bottom of one of our tamers instead. So one of the big weaknesses to Cross Hearts is when the Digimon actually do end up in the trash, we have a very hard way to be able to reuse them, and Cutemon is one of the best cards to be able to shore up that one weakness, to be able to reuse our cards a little bit more effectively. Next, we have Ignitemon. So Ignitemon is going to be another Cross Hearts level 3 Digimon. This time, it's going to be a purple level 3 Digimon, and he still can Digivolve for 0 on top of any level 2 with Cross Hearts in its traits. And he has a nice when attacking ability for us to try to utilize, where we get to delete one of our other Digimon to delete one of the opponent's unsuspended Digimon with a level that's equal to or lower than the deleted Digimons. So this is just an okay removal type of ability. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's not that amazing either, considering we have the save ability to be able to send them underneath our tamers. Then on top of that, he has a nice inheritable ability for us to utilize, where during all turns, once per turn, when you play a Digimon by a card effect, then we get to gain 1 memory, which is just half of what we're trying to do, is just be able to utilize our tamers to be able to play some of our Digimon by a card effect, and this card is a good card to take advantage of that and give us memory back for it. Next up, we have Mervymon. So Mervymon is actually a pretty decent level 6 purple Digimon for us to be playing around with, and she has the Digivolution cost, where she could Digivolve for 4 on top of a level 5 black or purple Digimon, while being a Cross Hearts Digimon herself. Then she has an ability to help make playing this card a little bit easier, where when you would play this card, you could use cards in your trash as Digivolution material for the Digicross ability, which she has the Digicross -3 of allowing us to shove 1 Digimon with Cross Hearts in its traits underneath this Digimon to reduce its play cost by 3, so this card's actually costing 8 instead of the 11. But I don't necessarily know if we're actually going to be trying to hard play this Digimon. We could, just because the option is available to us, but the on-play and when Digivolving ability is what we're trying to gain out of the card. So that ability states that we get to play 1 purple level 4 or lower Digimon card, or 1 level 4 or lower Digimon card with Cross Hearts in its traits from our trash without paying its memory cost. If this card was Digicrossed, then we get to add 1 to the number of cards used by this card effect. So if we're just Digivolving into this card, then we only get to revive 1 Digimon from our trash, which is okay. And if we hard play this card, then we get 2 Digimon out of this card, which is a little bit better, but obviously more expensive. And then it has the nice All Turns ability, where all of your Digimon with Retaliation or Cross Hearts in its traits gains the Rush and Blocker ability, adding some extra defense and aggression into the deck, assuming that we're not passing the memory over onto the opponent's side, or this card is going to be sticking around long enough for us to actually use this ability. So she's going to be a pretty interesting card to be using nonetheless. Next, we have a new version of Tanamon. So Tanamon's going to be the Sets Green level 2 Digimon, and it actually has a pretty decent inheritable ability. So its inheritable ability states that during your turn, once per turn, when you play a green tamer, then we get to draw a card. So we do have some guards that want to interact with tamer-based synergies, making this a good Digitama to use for those types of decks, allowing us to use our tamers more effectively with this inheritable, basically replacing the tamer that we played from our hand. Next up, we have a new version of Vegemon. So this new version of Vegemon has a pretty decent ability. Even though it's pretty simple, it seems pretty effective, where at the start of your turn, you get to gain 1 memory. So just having this card sit on the field will help us gain some additional memory, which is pretty decent to have, especially in green, since we know green can move up the stages pretty quickly. And then we also have a new version of Palamon that has a similar style of ability, where at the start of your turn, we get to draw 1 card, so it's just another card that we just want to have sitting on our field to accrue lots of value with. Next, we have a new option card for green to be using in the form of Poison Powder. So Poison Powder is a 3-costed option card, and it has the ability to reduce itself from our hand by 1 if we have a green tamer in play. So this card's actually going to be costing us 2, And it has the nice main ability where all of your opponent's Digimon gain the ability where during all turns, when this Digimon is suspended, lose 1 memory until the end of the opponent's turn, effectively acting like a mini ice wall. So this is a pretty decent option card to be using, considering it's the same style of effect that we had seen with the promo Akuamon. And considering green is all about suspending the opponent's Digimon, and if the opponent is going to want to attack, then their Digimon is going to have to be suspended. So it's just a good card to try to anti-tempo the opponent, with the security ability activating its main. Next up, we have a new version of Tokomon. So this new version of Tokomon is going to be trying to support the Angels-themed deck, with the inheritable ability where during your turn, once per turn, when you play a Digimon with Angel, Archangel, or Fallen Angel in its traits, then we get to draw 1 card, acting as just a good draw engine for that style of deck. Next, we have Clear Agumon. So this Clear Agumon is just going to be a yellow vanilla Digimon, nothing too special to write home about. Next, we have Centermon. So Centermon is going to be a level 4 yellow Digimon. Stats aren't anything too special, but it has a nice when Digivolving ability, where we get to place one of our other yellow Digimon on the top of our security stack face down. So this is actually a pretty interesting Digimon, acting like a tactical retreat, except on a when Digivolving ability, and that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, considering depending on the type of deck that you're playing, your Digimon might get deleted anyway, or you might want to shove some cards back into your security, acting as a nice alternative way to be able to recover. Next up, we have a new version of Wanyamon. So this new version of Wanyamon is doing something similar to what we saw with the Tanamon, except its inheritable ability is when attacking once per turn. If we have a blue tamer in play, then we get to draw 1 card, acting as another really solid generic draw engine for blue's Digitama slot to be utilizing. And speaking of blue tamers, next we have Nikolai. So Nikolai is going to be a new blue tamer to try to interact with the Gau and Gaugamon deck. So at the start of our main phase, one of our Digimon with Gau or Gaugamon in their name gain the jamming ability until the end of the turn. So this just allows our Digimon to be able to swing safely onto the opponent's security as best as we possibly can give them, just because we know that Thomas is kind of already interacting with unsuspending. So between the 2 tamers, we could use Thomas to give them multiple attacks, and we could have Nikolai make those attacks safe. Then he has a nice secondary ability where during your turn, when the opponent's hand size is increased by a card effect, then we get to suspend this tamer to gain 1 memory, which the Gau stuff wants to bounce the opponent's stuff anyway and increase their hand count to be able to make our cards more effective, and this is just playing on theme with that. And then we did get the rest of the Gau line spoiled, so we already had the rookie spoiled last week, so now we have the champion. So this is a new version of Gaugamon, and what this card is doing is it is having a nice when attacking ability where once per turn, if the opponent has 8 or more cards in the hand, then we get to gain 1 memory. So ideally we want to use this paired up with Nikolai to be able to give him jamming so that attack is safe, to have us be able to gain a memory relatively easily. Then he has a nice inheritable ability for us to use to try to increase the opponent's hand count, where when attacking once per turn, if we have a tamer on the field, ideally either Thomas or Nikolai, then we get to return one of the opponent's level 3 Digimon back to their hand, effectively increasing their hand count by a card effect to be able to trigger our Nikolai. Next, we have a new version of Mach Gaugamon. So this new version of Mach Gaugamon is another card that's trying to be aggressive and defensive and make our cards as effective as we can possibly make them. So it has a nice when Digivolving ability where this Digimon gains the blocker ability and plus 2000 DP for every 4 cards in the opponent's hand until the end of the opponent's next turn. So it seems like we want to actually swing with our level 4, then Digivolve into our level 5 to be able to gain this ability, and then from our level 5 we want to actually Digivolve then into our level 6 to use his inheritable ability where during all turns, once per turn, when your opponent's hand increases by a card effect, we could unsuspend this Digimon, so that way we could try to figure out a way to increase their hand size during their turn, or at the end of our turn, so that way we could unsuspend the Digimon and be able to utilize him as a blocker. Or if we want to, while we're in our level 6 and the turn doesn't pass over onto the opponent, then we could use it for an extra attack, which is just pretty decent for us to use, giving us extra utility on our cards. And the big level 6 that the deck wants to be playing with is obviously Mirage Gaugamon. So this new version of Mirage Gaugamon is actually pretty decent. So he has a nice Wind Digivolving ability where we get to return one of the opponent's at level 5 or lower Digimon back to their hand. So again, trying to bounce the opponent's Digimon to increase their hand size by card effects. And if no Digimon was returned by this effect, then we get to add the top card of the opponent's security back to their hand. So this is actually burning their security while increasing their hand count, which is actually a pretty decent ability to always make sure that we're going to be able to increase the opponent's hand size to try to make our cards as effective as we possibly can, as we just saw with that Mach Gaugamon. So ideally, again, you're going to want to swing with the level 4 with jamming, Digivolve into Mach, then use Mach's Wind Digivolving ability to give him some nice abilities, and then Digivolve the Mach into a Mirage to be able to get a card off the field, whether it's from the security or an actual Digimon, increase their hand size, and then unsuspend this Digimon, so that way he has the blocker ability and some nice DP boosting going on as well. And then on top of all of that, he has a nice all turns ability, which I'm actually a huge fan of because it's not only just a good aggressive ability, but it's a good defensive ability as well, just because once per turn, when your opponent's hand size increases by an effect, then for every 4 cards in their hand, we get to gain 1 memory. So this, if it just sits on the field long enough, kind of just deters them from wanting to draw extra cards by any of their card effects, and it's doing something what we already want to do, and something similar to the old Mirage Gaugamon, where we want to gain the memory back to make the evolution cheaper and more efficient for them having a nice hand size. So I think this is going to be a fantastic card to be using in a brand new version of the Gaugamon deck. I don't necessarily know if the old one is going to be that needed, considering this just does something similar but better. But who knows, we'll have to just see what people come up with when it comes to this type of a deck. But yeah, that's all of the spoilers that we got this week. There was quite a lot of them, and I'm expecting them to just keep bum rushing all of these spoilers until the set is released. I wish they would pace these out a little bit better, but oh well, what can we really do? I think that all of these new tech and tools are going to be really interesting to figure out how to actually utilize them. And this set is actually going to be a little bit more Digimon World digitized than I thought it would be initially. I thought it was just going to be a little bit of a splash, but it definitely seems like it's getting a lot of support in the set. And I think that based on what we know about the characters and some of the spoilers that we already got, we could assume that the red line is going to be more Biomon and Cross Hearts focused. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.